This section is short presentations for each of the courses that are offered in the Educational Administration program. You can get more detail on each of these courses by looking at the associated document that is in this module.
So let's begin with our courses. Joseph, why don't you start with 512, a policy?
512, Policy in Educational Administration, is a course that is focused on the dynamics of policy in education. It takes a look at how the state, the federal, and the local level decisions factor into creating district level policies that direct the educational program in the school district. The course also takes a look at the historical and cultural contexts for decision making related to educational policy as well. And it also produces a product that is part of a portfolio students take away from the coursework that is used in their certification. And that particular project or product for policy is the PAM, or the policy analysis. That's
okay. I teach finance, and finance generally gets a bad rap. People want to bring their calculators and such to class, and really finance, the focus of finance is to debunk the myth around school finance. There's nothing mysterious about it. The course consists of 4 major points. First is how schools are funded and organized in Washington State. And that sets the tone for how finance works. The second focus is how does the district money business work, from bonds to levies to the F-195, which is a district budget, and again is pretty transparent. The third one is ASB, which gives a principal an opportunity to read about himself in a paper if you're not careful, because auditors, there's just 1,000 banana peels on the road to school finance when it comes to ASB.
And we don't want to be in the paper, right?
I would prefer not to be in a paper under those circumstances.
Yeah.
And the last is building budgets, and how a principal deals with building budgets and how the money gets there, how you spend it, and it's allocated. There is a paper at the end called a resource allocation plan that is uploaded into the Canvas site during the internship. Also, this particular course has no textbooks. All materials come from the web and URLs and that kind of thing. The next one is going to be theory, and Don will talk about that because he teaches it.
So theory in education administration is focused on developing a foundation for your professional core values. We have a chance to examine current leadership trends. We identify the traits and practices that are going to help you be effective and successful as a school leader. This is focused through the lens of professional ethics, and an outgrowth of this class is what's called a common performance task. It's the ethical leader. We scaffold the products through the course of the quarter, so the culminating project is actually the result of several projects that we do during the quarter. And we use 2 textbooks with this class.
The next course is supervision, and supervision is one that principals traditionally have not done a good job on. And the course content focuses not only on TPEP, a lot of it is that, but generally speaking, it's bigger than TPEP. It's how to encourage an adult to grow in a collaborative and supportive fashion. And so when you're dealing with adults, you're dealing with people at different ages, people at different stages in their career, and those people need to know how it is that together you can increase professional efficacy. So next is law, which is Don's baby.
And it's a class that I really enjoy. I think that law, like finance, gets a kind of a bum rap. I tell my classes that if the Channel 5 news truck rolls into your parking lot, you don't know why they're there, you're not having a good day. The focus for this class is managing a lot of the day-to-day stuff that a school principal encounters, and a lot of that stuff frankly boils down to common sense, but there are legal topics that we need to know and understand, and we need to have those as firmly in mind as we have our home address in mind. We look at a lot of the important topics in the law: special education, student rights, due process, the duty of the school to act in the role of the parent, what we call in loco parentis. I tell the students that if it's not on fire and it's not holding a gun, you don't have to decide in the next 30 seconds. We don't want to be guilty of shooting from the hip. During the class, students develop products in the form of case briefs. As we look at particular cases, I have them do the reporting out on what that particular case involves. There's an interview paper that they write where they talk to somebody, a school principal, a special ed director, and find out about legal issues that are involved in their particular role. And then there's a final paper that focuses on an area of school law of interest to the student, or it might also be a project. Ultimately, I want this final product to be something that the student truly cares about. We use a text in this class. It's an important text. Again, a class that I truly enjoy, and I think that it demystifies the role of the law for the principal.
Joseph has spent many years as superintendent, and the next course is personnel. And Joseph can speak to that because he's been embroiled in it.
Oh, a lot. This course, EDAD 549 Seminar in School Personnel Administration, is really about being involved with critical reflection about what's involved with personnel. So the course takes a look at the philosophical and social foundations of personnel administration in education. Then it gets to the actual details, the nitty-gritty of day-to-day work. The day-to-day work in personnel is looking at resource planning, recruitment, selection of teachers and staff, induction and staff development. How do you differentiate for teachers and staff depending on their experience level in the schools? You actually have a different set of staff development plans for a brand new teacher than you do a mid-career teacher or a veteran teacher who's been in the position for 15, 20 years. Take a look at employee discipline, evaluation, collective bargaining, contract administration, grievances, and then a significant amount of time spent on motivation, incentives, and team building, because the core of personnel administration is people. And how do you nurture relationships at the same time you take care of the details of personnel administration, which is all those things I mentioned previously. So it really is a course about how do you manage people and how do you build relationships. That's it.
Next course is EDAD 550, Developing Staff and Community Relations. I teach that particular one. It's one of my favorite courses. It sounds like a public relations course, but it is certainly not public relations. I tend to call it Principling 101, because the heart and soul of the thing is developing school climate and culture, and that is the paramount job of a principal. So there's basically 5 components to developing staff and community relations. First off is to assess the culture of your own school building with an instrument called a systems culture audit, where you interview people, and then you assess how the culture of your school is put together. And you do that with the full knowledge, permission, and okay of your building principal. The other is, another facet is we interact with a minimum of 6 professions from the field, ranging from psychologists to principals to all the different certificated and non-certificated people you deal with. Another component is becoming intimately involved with classified employees, from cooks to custodians to secretaries to the whole gamut. And the deal there is you need to work a shift with them, so you have an understanding of how they operate. And the other component is take an assessment in human synergistics in dealing with small groups and working with small groups, because if you can't do a small group, you can't be a principal. And then the last is to interact with your colleagues in the small groups in baskets that are based on real life situation. There's no text required on this particular course. It's largely done with handouts and some things from the web. Next course is Planning for Curriculum Administration, and Joseph does that.
So there's a theme that I hope that you've seen in the explanation of these courses, is that our business is a people business. And curriculum administration isn't about managing the individual pieces of curriculum for curriculum instruction or learning. It's really about how do you manage the individuals that have a responsibility for curriculum in terms of teaching and learning. So the course takes a look at the philosophical and theoretical background for administering curriculum in all its various forms. This is much different than a teacher course on curriculum, which focuses on curriculum instruction. This course focuses on where does a principal apply support and leverage and pressure so that students get the best learning experience. And sometimes that's adoption of materials, sometimes that's involving district level committees on revising and reviewing curriculum, sometimes it's involving parents, sometimes it's just knowing how to use various tools of curriculum in terms of assessments and learning so that you meet federal and state standards. So it really is about those kinds of things. The final thing that the course focuses on is it helps potential principals or future principals take a look at the dynamic of education in the United States right now, which is that we can't really do all this as administrators by ourselves. In years past, it might have been possible. I doubt it. Never was for me. But it might have been possible to do it under the power of your own knowledge and strength. But in today's world, where there's so many accountability measures that have to be looked at, you have to do this in coordination with teacher leaders. So the course also takes a look at how do principals build, support, and direct teacher leaders.
The 9th course, which in the certification program, is Administering Elementary and Secondary Schools, EDAD 553. The goal of this course is to get participants out of their own school and out of their own grade level. And we do that by having it as a field trip class. So we meet one time on campus, and then we'll meet 7 subsequent times in 7 different schools, talking to the administrative team in those particular schools. And we go to elementaries and secondaries and some private schools and try to get a wide range of experience from those professionals in order to have them reiterate what is best practice and how do you deal with some of the nitty-gritty problems that roll down from the feds and the state and all kinds of policies that they have to do. The whole focus of the class is really a synthesis. So students are asked to do to lay out their own core values, to read 3 professional contributors' literature in the field, and to participate in a discussion with those principals and roll all that together into a product that lays all that out, inclusive of how they fit into it. There are some required textbooks, and we tend to look at that one as thinking outside the box. Then the last thing that is done for master's students is their field study or their internship, and Don will talk about that.
So the internship is a time that it takes a year-long period, this is the time when we want our students to get dirt under the fingernails. We want people to have real life experiences, experience the actual roles that the principal has in the school, and the whole variety of things that a principal has to be capable of doing or addressing. The state says that an internship must be not less than 540 hours, so we keep track with our interns of how that is going. The intern signs up for 3/4 of EDAD 592, and we take great pains to make sure we're in contact with each of the interns. Each one of us takes a group of the interns depending on geographical location, and we meet with them in formal seminars 5 times starting in the spring and on through fall and winter and early spring. We also go to their schools where we meet with them over coffee and have a chance to check in with them and make sure that the internship is going well and they're having access to the experiences that will make them successful. Almost without exception, our students apply for and receive a state grant that supports them and allows them to have access to subtime so they can spend time with the principal or otherwise doing internship activities during the day when otherwise the intern might be teaching a class. The outcome of the internship is that we want the student to have a level of comfort with the key skills that are involved in being the principal, whether it be the day-to-day working with students and teachers, conducting student discipline investigations, communicating with parents, running meetings, taking part in conversations about the school budget or school staffing. These are important components. And many of our interns get way more than 540 hours. It's not uncommon for an intern to have 700, 800, 900 hours accumulated by the end of the year. This is a rich, rich experience for the intern.
So that describes what a postmaster's certification program is. It's possible to get your master's at the same time. And so we have a research sequence that Joseph teaches and we'll talk about.
The research sequence starts with an introduction to educational research, which is EDAD 501. The course that you start off with, the introduction course, really is sort of the place where you plan out a full year's activity, which will culminate in you producing an action research project. But in 501 particularly, you are exposed to all the theoretical foundations of what research is and what goes into creating good research, and develop the sort of the eyes, the professional eyes, to know what is good research and what is sort of shoddy research. So the introduction course does use a text so that you formally step through both the formal identification of research in its various traditions, because there are lots of different styles of research, and then simultaneously, as you're studying about the different things that go into really high quality research, you are encouraged to begin to think about something you're really passionate about that you can create as a year-long project, which will result in a proposal for a research project that's specifically set up as an action research project, which is a particular segment of good research. That's the introduction to educational research.
So the second course in the sequence, which I have taught in the past, is EDAD 547. This is called Readings. In 501, the introductory class, the student has identified a topic or a problem that's based on her or his own school. And I think that's a key part of this, is that this is focused on the individual school and some problem or practice that arises from that school setting. And also has applicability to that school setting when the project is done. So by the end of 501, the student has identified the topic or the problem and research questions, and has begun an exploration of available research or literature related to that topic. So by the end of that first class, the student may have 3 or 4 or 5 articles peer-reviewed articles that have been identified, and thus the student can say, I kind of know the edges of the topic, and I know the thinking that is behind this topic and what other people have contributed already. Then in 547, the readings class, this is very individualized. So you as a student will in fact know your topic, and your topic will be different probably from anybody else taking 547 that quarter. So you will work very closely with Joseph in identifying additional articles, peer-reviewed articles related to your topic, and thus you're going to get a further understanding of what people have already written about this. It'll help you to understand some of the major thinking on this, and even if there are opposing points of view or differing points of view that have arisen in the past on the matter of research. But I think this is a very important time in the research sequence, and a result of this is that you will produce a literature review that is then added to the work that you have already done in 501 in the introductory class.
And then the next one?
The next course in the sequence after 501, then readings, is called Case Studies in Educational Administration. And in case studies, you take the work that you did in 501, where you sort of understand what research is generally about, how to do high quality research, and you go into your readings course where you sort of become sort of an expert in the particular topic you've chosen, because I will encourage you to read widely and deeply so that you know all the various themes associated with that theme. And oftentimes in 501 and 538, the project that you're looking at gets modified. As you learn more from the literature, you adjust your plans for research. Well, when you start in the third of the sequence, which is case studies in administration, you and I will have worked through and come up with a solid plan that you could actually implement at your school related to your problem practice. And you will actually be taking some sort of action to improve the problem of practice. And we actually communicate remotely, face-to-face. We don't get together every week like we do in 501, which is a 10-week course where you meet face-to-face. In both the readings course and in case studies, you're working independently with my support as your mentor through the process. But you actually are doing the actual research. You're actually a researcher looking and trying to improve a situation. The outcome is that at the end of the term, you take all the work that you started in 501, 547 readings, and in the case studies where you actually do the research, and you actually write up a formal research paper where you talk about what the problem was, what the literature said was important to the topic, and you take a look at what sort of actions you took, and you actually explain the results of your action so that we understand, so that we understand the outcomes for your research project. So that's 538. The next course after 538 is 539, which is part of the research sequence, because after you've actually understood by participating in the research process, the question that I pose to you in educational leadership, which is 539, is how, as a principal, will you be able to use research to influence those that you're supervising, teachers and staff? And what I want you to understand out of that class is that if you can look at research and make a decision about whether it's high quality research or poor research, then you know how to present high quality research to staff members to encourage them to think about their practice or issues that the school is facing from high quality research. One of the key things that you'll need to do is to be able to explain why research is reliable, and that's something that you will learn by being involved with the process of research. Together with trying to understand how you use research to influence those that you supervise, the class also takes a look at a couple of other areas that are important for an educational leader, and that's special ed law and due process, and it also takes a look at technology and the use of technology. As a principal, you have the responsibility of supervising teachers and staff, and their use of technology in appropriate ways. And so I, in that course, have you actually use some technology and study about the various technology standards so that you can supervise that appropriately with your staff. So that's the research sequence.
Okay, and two little tail end pieces and on the master's degree is sometimes people ask us, I already have a master's, would it be in my best interest to go through and get another? And the answer is no. There is no particular advantage to do that. If you have a master's, you have a master's, and then do the certification part. You don't need to redo the research. The other thing is most people take a comprehensive exam, and that comprehensive exam is focused on your research, not someone else's. And so we ask you to roll that out in a comprehensive exam, and then we do a little oral presentation of that just with us. And that seems to encapsulate the master's program quite well.
Good. Well, thank you
Thank
for
you.
sharing with our future students.
Sound good.
Thank you for listening, and again, if you want more details, take a look at the associated document in this module.